Hey everyone, this is Stephen Weintraub with Collider. I'm here at TIFF at the Cinema Center at MARBL with Alexander Payne for the Holdovers. Sir, thank you for coming in the studio today.
You're very welcome.
I was like, he's just going to nod. I'm like, listen, I've been a fan of your work for a long time. And before we get starting to talk about your exceptional new movie, I'm curious, for people that have never seen anything you've directed, what is the first thing you'd like them watching and why?
Maybe Election. Probably that remains the movie I probably get the most compliments on from film nerds. You know, I get a lot of Sideways, some Descendants, a lot of Nebraska, but yeah, I think Election's pretty good.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, you know, I might have watched it once or twice.
You know what? It's the only feature I've made that's not too long.
Is it 90 minutes?
No, it's not about the actual length, Steve. It's about how it feels while you're watching it.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And that one has a pretty good rhythm to it. All the other movies I made at some point are just a little bit too long in a way I couldn't avoid during post. But Election has a very good metronome to it.
Which of your films changed the most in the editing room in ways you didn't expect going in?
Yikes. What a question. None of the films changes a lot, but to hone the film, probably Election.
Oh, wow. We're going back to there too.
Election was over a year in editing. We had 2 Christmas parties in the cutting room.
Did you edit that analog or digital?
That was the first Avid picture.
Oh, okay.
Citizen Ruth, my first feature, was on film. And then we were still shooting film. I shot film until 2010. But yeah, we cut Avid, but it took a long time to really hone. And also, it's the only time I've ever had to go back and shoot something new for a movie. So Jim Taylor and I wrote a new ending for it because the ending I had shot originally wasn't working.
It's so interesting. I'm gonna leave your previous films alone and jump into why I get to talk to you.
You brought it up. I didn't bring it up.
No, believe me, I could keep going. Yeah. Listen, the Holdovers is fantastic.
Thank you very much.
And one of the things and I think you were going for this, but I really felt like the film was shot in the 70s and like just disappeared in a vault. And then I just watched it, you know?
If you really, really think that, and you're not just giving me a compliment, and I do believe you, that's really the greatest compliment you could give me, because that's kind of what I was going for. I mean, to a certain degree, I've been sort of trying to make 70s movies my whole, career. But on this one, I tried to take it one step further and kind of, to some degree, create the illusion that it had been actually made in the 70s.
Well, talk about one of the things
and I got to tell you, 2 movies which maybe are forerunners to that. Did you see Bait, the English movie Bait? Came out about 4 years ago, but it was really made by some maniac English guy that it looks authentically as though it had been made in about 1964, but he really went to town with it. And then also, I'd have to cite Paper Moon, which, not to compare my film to that great masterpiece, but there he was in the 70s making a film that kind of looks like it had been made in the 30s. So to some degree, I was doing the same thing, making a film now in the 2020s that basically is trying to look like it had been in the 70s.
Let's start right from the beginning, and this is not a spoiler because it's how the movie opens, but you went with the vintage, like the credits, the focus, everything. So can you sort of talk about that, the beginning of the film and going for that?
Well, I have a very good graphic artist. And we slapped an R banner rating on it, MPAA rating. And then I had my graphic artist design a vintage Focus Features logo and a vintage Miramax logo. And we just went from there. And to their credit, Focus and Miramax went for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was wondering if they were like, well, they must have thought it was cool, though. It looked cool.
They did, but you never know with these conservative companies, these mega companies. Oh, no, we don't do that. And, but to really do those things thoroughly and, with no tells that it really is contemporary, my hat's off to them.
So it's been, I think, 6 years or 7 years since you've made a film. Was it always going to be this, or did you think about making something else instead of this film?
Between downsizing and now, I was involved in 2 features. One, I flirted for a while with making the menu.
Oh, wow.
And I went down the football field a little ways with that. Ultimately, I bowed out. And then I prepped a film that was really lovely. And I was 4 or 5 days away from the start of shooting, and we pulled the plug. That was in 2019. It was a very lovely script. I had Mads Mikkelsen and shooting in 4 different countries and 7 U.S. states, and had to pull the plug. Everybody's got that at some point or another in his or her career, it seems, and that was my turn.
Sure. Going back into Holdovers.
Thank you for not asking for details on that.
No,
because I do name names.
Right. I mean, believe me, if I had more time, I would.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
I would dig. But what is it? Listen, people have been waiting for your return of working with Paul since Sideways.
Mostly me. I'm the one who's most been waiting for that.
Hi, also me.
Thank you.
So my thing is that did you ever come close on another project? And for this, was it sort of like, when did you realize, oh, this is going to be the one?
Didn't come close on another one. And this one was not tailored for Paul, but written with him in mind from the get-go.
Did he know that?
I told him early on, I said, just, this Kat and I are conceiving something for you. Great, great, great. What is it? And I told him the basic premise. Great. I showed him an early draft. He still liked it. And we kept honing the draft, and it worked out well. Couldn't have worked out better.
So he is fantastic in this. Talk a little bit about what it's like directing Paul on set. Obviously, you must have a shorthand by now, but what is it like when he is doing something great, but it's not exactly what you need? How exactly do you work with an actor or with Paul to help craft that performance?
It's usually pretty exactly what I need.
Oh.
And we have a very good creative wavelength or something. And I will say that you mentioned shorthand. It's very short at this point.
Is it a nod, or are you actually exchanging a word?
It's kind of like that. Like some of the people around camera, the key grip, the gaffer would say, we've seen shorthand before, but not quite that short.
Well, one of the things about this is that you shot, I believe, no sound stages. Everything was on location in Massachusetts. And for me, that added so much to the realism, because I really felt like you're in these real places. So talk a little bit about, was that a challenging thing, or was with the Massachusetts tax rebate, because everyone gets, the rebates, did that enable you to be able to do this?
Well, those are kind of 2 different questions.
Yeah,
one, the tax rebate question and not shooting on sound stages.
Yeah, I
can't stand shooting on stages. I mean, usually, and most of my movies are location movies. Downsizing wasn't, because it had all that science fiction stuff in it, so you had to build things. But I can't stand shooting on stages. I like to be only on locations. But usually you have to build a bathroom or a closet or something that's too small. This one was 100% location. And it was, now folding in your question about Massachusetts, Massachusetts worked out great, both because it had all the locations I needed and was user-friendly for the budget people with the tax incentive. But I didn't really know from New England, really, before making this movie. I'd traveled through New England, but hadn't spent time there. And change comes slowly. So it was really not easy, but relatively effortless to make a period film there, to find old locations, which required relatively little modification.
Was it about this material that said, I want to tell this story? Because I believe it was originally like a TV thing, and then you had an idea to make it a movie. I could be wrong about this.
I had the idea for this movie for about 12 years. Never got around to writing it. And nor did I really have the life experience to write it authentically. And then I was submitted a pilot for a TV show that would take place in a boarding school. And the writing was really good. So I called the writer and I said, you've written a fine pilot, I want to make it, but would you consider writing something, a feature, in that same world with this idea? And he accepted, and it worked out really well.
How long from when you had that conversation did it take to get a script that you were really happy with?
2 or 3 years, something like that.
Well, that's not that long.
No, maybe shorter. I don't know. I don't really remember. Call it 2 or 3 years. Certainly by the time we were nearing production, it was 2 or 3 years.
Was it one of these things that once you had the script, that it was easy to get the financing? Or was it one of these things where it took a lot of work?
It's never easy. Sometimes it's less hard.
Sure.
And this one was relatively medium, easy, hearty sort of kind of for
Sure.
but it was the first time I had worked with an independent financier. It's the company Miramax, which is of course many generations removed from its origins. And the guy who runs it, Bill Block, read the screenplay. He and I had a history, a million years ago, he had wanted to finance Sideways, for Pete's sake. So it worked out, and for it to be independently financed, and then he sold it. He and CAA sold it exactly a year ago here in Toronto to Focus Features.
Do you still get residuals for Pinot Noir?
You know what? I got to tell you something. I'm the guy who's made the least amount of money off that movie. You know who's made money? The Hitching Post, that restaurant in Santa Ynez, and a bunch of those winemakers. They continue to reap millions off that film. What about the guy with the thumbs over here? Zero. Although when I do go up to Santa Ynez and have dinner at the Hitching Post, Frank, who owns the place, will walk me out to my car and put a case in the trunk of my car. So that's nice. Yeah. Let's just say farmers are thrifty, and that includes winemakers. Thrifty.
I really do think, though, that film absolutely, without a doubt, impacted the entire wine industry. And I'm sure you've heard that over the years.
It never ceases to astonish me. And every time I hear that, it's like, really? Really? But heck, a guy's writing, a former not LA Times, but Los Angeles film critic, Kirk Honeycutt, is writing a book on Sideways right now, and about how it was made and then its impact on the wine industry.
Yeah.
It's really something. I never could have foreseen that. I just thought it was a nice little comedy.
Going back into Holdovers and also your work, I've spoken to a lot of people, and for example, Roger Deakins likes to have one camera on set, and Ridley Scott likes to have 6 or 8. How do you typically like to shoot? There we go. Is it always been like that?
Yes. One camera, sometimes 2.
Sure.
If you need to save, perform. I mean, for example, in Sideways, the repartee between those 2 actors, there were times where I had to throw up 2 cameras so that they could easily overlap each other and talk over each other and stuff like that. And then when you have a lot of extras, for example, you got to throw up a bunch of cameras. But in general, I'm a 1 camera kind of guy.
This is basically a 3-hander, Holdovers, about 3 people trying to find family. Was that the idea that you originally? Can you sort of talk about that genesis of that idea? And all 3 are such distinct personalities and people, and you do a great job in the film of establishing all 3 and interweaving their story.
The idea I presented to David Hemmingson was primarily about the relationship between the teacher and the boy, and it's he who devised the cook. So I really have David Hemmingson to thank for that. And then once he came up with that character, then it was off to the races.
I read that Dominic, who plays the student, that you cast someone locally, and talk a little bit about casting Dominic and the fact that he has never acted in a movie before.
It's a good story, and I'm so glad you're asking me early on in the promotion of this film, so I'm not tired of telling the damn story, because It's going to be like a story I'm going to have to tell a bunch of times. So you're getting it relatively fresh. Oy vey. So I had a New York-based casting director, Susan Shopmaker, and bless her heart, she and her team watched about 800 submissions. Because these days, all you have to do is put yourself on tape, press send, but we watch everything. So of those 800, I probably watched about 80. Didn't like any of them. We got other parts from that process, but not the lead. And so we had talked early on about finally just calling up the drama departments of the schools, the boarding schools where we'd actually be shooting. And we did that. And there he was. He was a senior at Deerfield. Had never been in front of a camera, a star in the drama club, but never been in a ham, but never been in front of a camera. He just took to it like a duck to water.
Yeah, what is it like actually directing someone who hasn't been on set before? And because it obviously is I would imagine it's a different skill set as a director. Like Paul, it's minimal, but I'm not sure how it is with Dominic.
The thing about this guy, Dominic Sessa, is that he is born with it. And I don't know if I've actually seen that before, that really from the first day, you talk about what do you have to teach, like there was a shot on the very first day where he had to act to a piece of tape on the matte box of the camera, which pro actors sort of have to learn how to do and get used to and imagine the interlocutor over here. And he just did it. So Paul Giamatti and I, told each other that we'd kind of help him out and give him little tips and so forth, but you only had to tell him once.
What did you
really? It was just interesting to see someone genuinely born with. And I asked him, I said, how are you able to, you've never done this before. How are you able to focus and act as well as you're acting with the camera and those lights and all those guys around you and everything? And he goes, well, I just don't think about them, which is exactly the right thing. He's just a born pro jerk.
With this film, talk a little bit about, you get in the editing room. What did you learn from friends and family screenings that maybe you weren't expecting? Did you have to tweak anything?
Oh yeah, constantly tweaking. But there was nothing major. It sort of, I didn't shoot too much footage. And from my buddies, I sort of, if you put this scene a little earlier, and that was about it. But the script was pretty tight. And the first cuts of the film corresponded very exactly to the script. And the final film is basically the screenplay with maybe 2 or 3 small scenes removed.
Obviously, you do not have MARBL money to make this. So what ended up being the things you were most nervous to be able to pull off with the time and the schedule and budget that you had?
Had to go back to the well a few times for VFX in post to help out with the snow, because during shooting, we were blessed with a lot of snow, which was great, and then put down artificial snow, and then thought, we'll need VFX to put that in. Also had to put in some VFX in post, like snow flurries.
Sure. And
they couldn't get that right for a long time. So it looked real. It kept looking fakey. So VFX budget, and then music. Music's always a big one. And this is the first time I've had a kind of, for my level anyway, gigantic music budget, over $1 million for both score and store-bought music. And I was happy that Miramax, the financier at the time, ponied up for that. They realized its importance.
So I'm curious, were there, speaking of songs, how much were you picking from things you could afford and deciding where you wanted to splurge? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. So it's a constant, talk to any director, and it's a constant process of what works and what can we afford. And sometimes it's even find the artist to get clearance and permission. And in this one, though, we skimped and saved a little bit to be able to afford one big splurge, which was Cat Stevens. Cat Stevens was the expensive one.
I also, it's interesting because I think some musicians would probably, and I'm of course guessing, some musicians I'm sure would love their music to be in the movie and would give you a discount.
You'd think.
Right. But everyone wants to get paid.
With Cat Stevens, it was this astronomical amount. And he happens to be half Cypriot. I happen to be of Greek ancestry myself. So I wrote a letter to his son who runs his company for him. I said, hey, I'm a Greek, you're a Greek, right? Can't you give a Greek a break? For you, 25% off. And it was still astronomical, but worth it. The music's just, I tried to replace it and couldn't do it. It's just too damn good.
Yeah, he's talented.
No, it's just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I want to make sure I don't think I can pronounce your cinematographer's name.
Eigelbrilde.
Thank you.
Eigelbrilde, Dane.
So talk a little bit about why you wanted to work with him, and what was it about his style that said this will work perfectly for this?
I just like the dude. He's a really smart dude. I had first noticed his work. He shot In Bruges 15 years ago, which was a really good movie. And then the aforementioned movie that fell apart 5 days before production 4 years ago, I had met him for that, but not hired him, but liked him a lot. And also Fincher told me one time he's the hardest working DP I've ever worked with. So, and then I sent him the script and he just had really good thoughts and really good comments about it. And I said, it just felt right. Just felt right.
How do you typically work with your...
And let me just say too, that when you hire a department head, DP, cinematographer, costume designer. It's not just that person you hire, it's whom they bring with them.
Sure.
And so the quality of the crew he brought with him was really terrific. And also the crew we found locally in Boston was terrific. Gaffer and Key Grip were just great.
Yeah, they have a huge film community there now because of how much has been shot.
Yeah.
You know, how do you typically like to work with your DP? And for example, on Holdovers, are you storyboarding a lot before stepping on set?
Never storyboarded in my life.
So
only on downsizing because of the visual effects.
So, for example, you're shooting a scene with Paul. It's Monday morning. It's 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. You step on set. How do you typically figure out how what you're going to do when you step there?
Each scene is different. I think a director enters every scene with a concept, some vacillating somewhere between specific and vague about how the day's going to go. Obviously, you feel better when it's specific, like, here's what we're doing today, everybody, and like map out the shots. But basically, you just, where would people go naturally? Like, if this weren't a movie, what would be the realistic blocking of it? And then, as Antonioni used to say, you make a documentary about it. You figure out where the actors really would, where those people really would go, and then you make a documentary about it, a well-shot documentary, which I always tell myself that because it's a very, it's a soothing way to think about the often panic-inducing process of figuring out coverage.
My thing is that, like, because there's some directors who work a lot with close-ups, and there's others who like the two-shot or, you know, moving camera or whatever it may be. And there's no right answer, but I'm just curious, when you choose, when do you want your close-ups?
Save the big heads. Right. That goes back to film school, man. We always told one another, save the big heads. Now, because I'm saying the obvious, but a close-up has power and meaning, and when you cut to it, if you haven't been using it in a while, it has. Now, there are a million exceptions to that. Look at Sergio Leone films. It just starts with close-ups. It like stays in close-up. Scope close-ups, no less. But I'm kind of old school in that way, that I like to save the big heads.
Yeah, but like I said, what's fascinating is there's no right answer. I have found, though, sometimes when someone uses too many close-ups, they're too close and too many shots, it does bother me. Because there's...
Well, and if done unskillfully, it bleeds into, you know, TV coverage, because they work so fast and it's so dialogue-based that it's basically just big heads the whole time.
I read, could be wrong, that you and Reese might do an election sequel.
Tom Perrotta, who wrote the book Election, has written a very fine sequel. And Reese Witherspoon and I have talked about it, and Jim Taylor and I, my co-writer, and about doing it, but we just haven't gotten to it yet.
Is it something that you think is actually going to happen? Or is it one of these things where, yeah, maybe?
I don't know yet.
Is it because I haven't read the book?
No, it's only because everything takes a while. And I have a couple things to do before that. And we'll just see how it falls. But it would be lovely to do. I'd love to work with Reese. I mean, that's another actor I've been dying to work with for all these years, is Reese Witherspoon. And we're always like throwing each other flowers. When are we going to work together again? So there's a structure in place for us to do that, but I just haven't pulled the trigger yet. It's kind of up to me. Well, but I just have some other stuff before on my docket.
Sure. My question, though, is Election. Everyone loves that movie. Is there in your mind, is it sort of like, do I want to play in that world again?
You want to make Godfather 2, not Godfather 3.
Right, exactly.
So that's what I got to figure out, is can it be Godfather 2 and not Godfather 3?
Yeah. Man,
with all respect, Mr. Coppola, to Godfather 3.
What he said, 100%. Speaking of Coppola, I cannot wait to see his new film.
Megalopolis.
Oh my God.
Can't wait.
I am over the moon that he has made this film.
He's pretty far along in cutting right now. It'll be out next year, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and the fact that, all that, speaking of wine, all that wine paid for that movie.
Big time. Right.
You know?
Yep. He's betting on himself, as he's always done.
I couldn't be more excited for a film, honestly.
Also, look out. There's a wonderful new book about Mr. Coppola coming out by Sam Wasson. Do you know who Sam Wasson is? He wrote the book about Chinatown. He just had an oral history of Hollywood out with Janine Basinger. And he has just written a wonderful new history of zoetrope. and of Coppola, and it's coming out in, I think, November, December.
So I'm guessing that you've already read it.
I've read about half of it, and Sam Watson's a friend of mine.
And there it is. The cheat code of being a director in Hollywood is you get sent early editions.
Well, you know, membership has its privileges.
Besides the American Express card.
Yeah.
What do you think? You mentioned you have some other projects. May I ask, what are you developing right now?
You know, famous last words, and he said that at TIFF in 2023 and it never came to be, and he's so pathetic and all that. But I'll tell you,
I don't think we're going to say that.
I've long wanted, let's just say I've long wanted to make a Western.
Okay.
I somehow think these nice little comedies I've made are leading me toward my true destiny, I think and hope, which is Westerns.
Is the script done?
No.
You guys are writing now, or writing when there's not a strike?
We're conceiving it now.
I'm a huge fan of the Western genre. Viggo Mortensen was in yesterday for his Western, which is an unconventional Western, breaks narrative structure, really well done. How much is it a Western you've been thinking about for a very long time? And how does it fit into the pantheon of previous Westerns, or are you bringing the Alexander Payne version?
Who the hell knows? No, obviously it'll be as filtered through me. But I like traditional Westerns. I like good traditional Westerns.
I'm so curious what your version of a Western is.
Me too. I'm curious too. That's why I'd like to make it. I'd like to know what it is.
Yeah, I'm digging for information. I'm not getting much. I'm hitting a lot of dirt.
Well, look, one thing I'm doing, though, is not simply watching a bunch of old Westerns, but also reading late 19th century American history in particular, and Nebraska history. I'm sorry. American history in general, Nebraska history in particular. I wanted to be a Western set in Nebraska, central Nebraska, in about the 1880s.
I would say that the locations there are probably, you can find locations that look exactly like they are from the 1880s.
I hope so. You know, I hope sometimes you set something someplace, but it actually looks more like that used to look somewhere else. So I'm hoping we can, and then you have to deal with old damn tax incentive crap.
Yeah, you might be in New Mexico.
No, that doesn't look at all like Nebraska.
I was thinking Viggo shot his film in Mexico, the majority of it, and then other shots here in Canada, in Ontario.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, in Ontario.
Yeah.
Revenant was shot in BC, I think, and McCabe and Mrs. Miller was shot in BC.
Yeah. I am so curious. So do you think is the Western thing the thing that you're spending the most time on?
No, the thing I'm spending the most time on right now is talking about this movie. Just starting that.
Right. You're going to be doing this for the rest of the year.
And what did I do yesterday? Ordered a new dishwasher from Costco because the first one that came didn't fit.
Is that true?
Yeah, 3/8 of an inch off.
Did you blame? Yeah, there we go.
Buck stops here.
Right. Okay. I was going to say, at least you're taking responsibility for
Guy with the thumbs.
Right.
So I've been having to do a bunch of life crap before really, really getting back to writing. And, it's a blessing to have a movie that people want to, that the studio wants to promote and you want to talk about. That's wonderful. And I look forward to getting back to creative work.
Well, what's interesting is that with the strike, it's mostly directors that are getting out there and promoting, the work.
It's about time.
Right, exactly. To you, is it something though, like being serious, there's been many directors in the past, I use a Kubrick for an example, it's just one person, but there's a lot of directors who really did not ever want to explain their stuff and they wanted the work to speak for it. And there's other directors who will, break down every aspect.
This is a good question to end on. So here's where I finally was able to articulate it to myself, which is I can and will talk about process. I can't and won't talk about themes. I won't explain anything in the movie. So I think if you ask a director about, well, how'd you do this and how'd you do that, like the logistics of it, that you can kind of talk about. But, it seems like all your movies have disgruntled middle-aged men in them. Like, leave me alone, man. Just, I don't know how to talk about that.
What's good is I didn't bring up any of that.
Well, you're a wonderful interviewer.
I'm going to say, and on that note, that is the best I'm going to get out of him. So I'm going to say, I really loved your movie.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much for coming in.
You bet.
And I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you.